Hello everyone, this is Dragon GGY. This is the operator Hindsight dedicated to the upcoming character Typhon, and let's get into it. Typhon is a 6-star besieger under the sniper class. The trait for the archetype is rather simple: prioritize attacking enemy with the highest weight. They have a unique attack range, being able to cover a long and wide range, but not covering the one lane in front of them. In practice though, it's pretty easy to play around that. Besiegers have an attack interval of 2.4 seconds, only faster than artillery at 2.8 seconds and sharpshooters at 2.7 seconds. But one thing worth pointing out is that of all besiegers, Typhon has the shortest attack startup at only 1 frame, both for auto attacks and attacks during skills. What that means is that there's only a 1 frame delay between Typhon doing her attack animation and the projectile starting to fly. Instead, she has a pretty long recovery. All the bow spinning and string pulling are her recovery animations, which means her damage will register faster than all other besiegers. Combining with the various CC in her kit, Typhon is very good at keeping her prey in her range. You can also use this and cut off the recovery animation by activating skill 2 or skill 3. That also means that she can be a pretty optimal buff target for Spirea, if you're interested, but just saying, Spirea is far from being the best buffer for Typhon. Talent 1, when attacking continuously, gradually ignores the target's defense. Each attack stacks 10% up to 50%. The effect resets if Typhon does not attack for 8 seconds. A few notes: when the description says attacks, it actually refers to dealing damage, so each instance of damage can give her 1 stack. This is quite relevant for skill 2 and 3, where she can deal multiple hits in 1 attack. Also, the defense ignore will stack before the damage applies, which means that she will always have at least 10% defense ignore, and max stack will be effective on the 5th damage, not after, so that's also very welcomed. When the talent is active, Typhon will have a very light aura around her, which honestly is hard to distinguish from all the effects of her skills, and I recommend observing the upgoing arrows instead. Comparing to Rosa's post-module talent, this talent doesn't have weight limitations, but instead requires some time to build up. But like I said, all her skills can help her stack up faster, either with attack speed or multi-hits in 1 attack. Talent 2, when damaging an enemy for the first time during each skill activation, increases attack to 160%, 170% at potential 5, and slows them for 3 seconds. The effect of this talent will reset for every skill activation. If an enemy can even survive that long, that is. The damage increase is an attack scale and a very big part of Typhon's strength. This talent is what I called a Reaper talent. It greatly increases Typhon's efficiency at dealing with multiple targets, especially mobs. First, it provides high damage on the first hit. We talk about how backloaded damage is an inferior pattern, and this is what I would call the front-loaded damage. The advantage is easy to understand. Higher DPH on the first hit can potentially take down an enemy in 1 attack, where it may have been 2 without the talent. Remember, Besieger has a 2.4 second attack interval, so saving 1 hit is saving 2.4 seconds. Speaking of that, the 3-second slow is also enough to cover her attack interval for skill 1 and skill 2, so it is easier to land the 2nd hit on her enemy, potentially confirming the kill. Typhon comes with the Besieger X module. The base effect is a massive damage boost against heavy enemies and another final multiplier. For talent upgrades, it increases the defense ignore percentage from her talent 1 to 60%, now on par with Rosa. The time before effect reset is also increased by 2 seconds. There's nothing too much to explain about this module. The base is one of the strongest damage amplification out of all modules, and makes good sense because most of the high defense enemies are heavy as well, and the talent upgrades improved her effectiveness against them. Overall, this module is a big part to her damage potential, which, to be honest, is becoming a trend for damage dealers these days. Module level 3 is highly recommended, and if you ever decide to use her, I would say you should at least unlock her module level 1. Now let's talk about her skills. My take is skill 2 mastery 3 more or less around skill 3 mastery 3. These 2 skills have very different use scenarios as well as their preferable targets, so it's more up to what situation she will end up in when you use her. but skill 1 is not recommended. Skill 1, Swift Strike Gamma, attack plus 45%, attack speed plus 45, 15/35, 35-second auto recovery skill. Classic filler skill 1, numbers are not too shabby, but there's just no reason to use this over skill 2 and skill 3. From here on, I will put enemies with weight 2 or less as light and weight 3 or more as heavy. Skill 2, attack plus 50%, change attacks to fire 2 arrows that prioritize different targets. Each arrow has a 40% chance to stun target for 1 second. Upon second activation and onwards, duration becomes unlimited, much like Thorn's skill 3. This is a 42/50 20-second skill. Now there are a lot of stats below. The DPS for hitting one target with both arrows are pretty okay, but pay attention to these two lines of stats. First, the DPS when she's only hitting an enemy with one arrow are of 3-digit level. But at the same time, the first hit she deals with 2 arrows on one target is as high as 5k. Let's talk about what these numbers entail. In 2024, a 3-digit DPS for an AFK skill is rather absurd. For reference, Blaze, whose block 3, attack 3, does 1995 DPS post-module. Thorn's skill 3, whose single target, does 2087 DPS. So that's even above Typhon when she's landing 2 arrows on one target. Well, Rosa post-module does 4-digit DPS to heavy enemies with auto attacks. That just shows us how the skill has some old school level stats for 2024 standards. So what exactly makes this skill good? It's the first hit DPH. If enemies are coming one by one, Typhon can always hit them with both arrows that deals 5,180 to light enemies and 5,956 to heavy ones. You may not have realized, but this is actually an one-hit line for a lot of grunts in the game. If not, they will be a guaranteed kill for the second hit. Don't forget, she slows them as well to prep for the killer shot. If Typhon gets buffed like relics in IS, that initial damage goes even higher. Below are examples of enemies who will be insta-killed by Typhon in one attack. Seeing any familiar faces? So, like I said, talent 2 is a big part to her strength. DPS do not tell the full story of killing mobs in 1 or 2 attacks. So it is clear that the skill is best when enemies are running into her range one by one, and worst when she has to constantly shoot at 2 targets. You can say for Besieger's range, it's hard to not pick up a lot of enemies, but what I recommend is that you take that as an advantage and position her where it's more optimal. Now we've talked about old school stats, but the skill also has some modern design to it. First of all, we talked about its synergy with Talent 1, so each arrow hit gives 1 stack of defense ignore, so full talent is effective on her 3rd attack during skill. Next is the stun, so each arrow has an independent 40% chance of stunning an enemy, so when landing both on the same target, the chance goes up to 64%. When combined with the shot stars up to Typhon's attack animation, she can sometimes interrupt enemies' attack before the damage would register. Finally is how they designed the SP pattern for this skill. Most of these warm-up skills starts with 0 SP, that is also true for Thorn's skill 3, which has a very similar two-phase design. However, Typhon only needs 8 seconds to start her first skill, which unlike Thorn's again, is at full strength instead of a half of. So it is viable to start with Typhon, use her first skill to get through the initial phase of the stage, during which you can deploy your vanguards and other members in the formation. This is more possible in IS where you may have more DP at the start. If you try this, it will make the long 50-second downtime before her next skill less painful to wait for. If you compare this to Blaze and Thorns, yes, it is a little longer, but you get 20 seconds in between where Typhon is at her full power, so she's still reasonably comfortable to use as long as you don't expect her to solo the stage. So to conclude the advantage of this skill, how about you think of it this way? Try to name an operator who deals 5k damage to any enemies that walks into the range from a distance, harder when they are heavy, and ignore a good proportion of their defense, while able to slow, potentially stun them. More importantly, does that consistently after some time. So if you're interested, well, try out Typhon's skill 2. Drawbacks are also clear for reasons I mentioned. 1. Weak when she's never able to land 2 arrows on the same target. She's not exactly a horde killer after all, she's just killing them faster in single target ops standards. 2. If the stage is relatively short, or you just can't find the time to deploy her until the middle of the stage, those are unfavored circumstances for this skill. But don't forget, even on the first use, Typhon is at her full power, so don't be afraid to use skill 2 even just once when necessary. Skill 3 immediately marks a target within attack range. Attack interval plus 3.1 seconds into 5.5 seconds. Change attacks to fire a rain of arrows at the marked target that randomly targets enemy around the mark, dealing 175% of attack as physical damage 5 times and stuns them for 0.4 seconds. A 25/40 skill with 10 ammo can be manually deactivated. The stats of these skills are shown below. Yes, this is a 100k plus total damage skill, but it does take at least 51.5 seconds for Typhon to fire all her bullets. Still, it has decent numbers, and numbers are not everything about the skill. Let's first break down how this skill works. First, for target selection, it follows the trait of besiegers and prioritizes marking the heaviest enemy in range, and cannot be used when there are no enemies in the range. After lock-on, Typhon actually has a global attack range, but only attacks enemy within the marker ring. The ring has a 1.3 tile radius. In Dark Knights, normal entities have a volume or detection radius of 0.1 tile, so as a basic plane geometry problem, enemies in the diagonal tile will not be targeted because the length of a diagonal line is square root of 2, which is 1.414. And it's just a little bit longer than the radius of the marker ring plus the detection radius of the enemy, which is 1.3 plus 0.1 equals to 1.4. Now back to the marker. After the marker lock on, the ring will then follow the target until they are defeated or when they enter the blue box, after which it will stay at the spot until all ammos are consumed or the skill is manually deactivated. If the target enters a portal, the marker will stay at the entry and lock back into the target when they reappear at the exit. If the target has multiple phases, the marker will remain locked on after phase change. When attacking, each arrow in the same attack will seek its target individually and on a random basis, unaffected by Besieger trait. Arrows will land with an interval of 0.1 seconds between each arrow, so these two mechanisms combined, it can sort of prevent the overkill like Ixia's 5 burst shot or Mythic Caster's stored attacks where they all target the same enemy and subsequent damage will be lost if they are defeated by an earlier burst. But that is just partly avoiding the overkill. In fact, because 0.1 second is still quite short, sometimes back-to-back arrows will still go to waste. Also, available targets in range are updated every 0.2 seconds, so if enemies are coming one by one, not stepping into the range in time, you may end up with the first arrow killing off a mob, then all subsequent arrows are lost because they can't find a target. Finally, this skill is one of the special occasions where additional effects are applied after damage, in this case referring to the stun. So if you don't deal damage at all, which may be due to dodge or a barrier, then the stun will not be applied either. This is a timeline of her attack patterns during skill 3. It takes 1 second for her to start a skill, then again, only 1 frame delay before the projectile starts flying. The whole 164 frames afterwards are all her recovery animations, where she reloads an arrow, pulls the string, and goes idle, making up for the whole 5.5 second attack interval. It takes around 0.8 seconds for all the arrows to land and deal damage. Upon the final arrow, instead of the long recovery again, it plays a recovery animation where she returns to her normal stance. Let's conclude the pros and cons. Pros for using this skill: being able to continuously deal damage to an isolated target, or when there are mobs that run by, kill them up quickly. The 5 arrow bursts make it so that she can stack full talent 1 in 1 attack. Also, you may realize that Typhon has a ton of attack scales, a 155% scale to heavy enemies with module, a 170 first hit scale, and the 175 scale from this skill. So she's a very good candidate for receiving attack buffs, even when the buff can only cover the first few shots from the skill. Cons for using this skill, well, it's mostly a boss exclusive skill. May be suitable for some elite, but most of the time it's not ideal for dealing with mobs because it almost ends up as an overkill, losing out on damage from subsequent arrows. Even when it's against a boss, having a lot of mobs in proximity will take away tons of damage from the skill, which is not great either. Lastly, this skill is very susceptible to attack speed debuffs. You don't want Typhon to sit there for 10 seconds without doing anything or even losing out her defense ignore stacks. So like I said, skill 2 and skill 3 have very different use scenarios, so pick your mastery priority based on where you would use her more. Out of the Besieger class, most of the previous operators are dedicated to dealing with a certain type of enemy. For example, Tota for Invis enemy, Typhons for Sarkats, and Rosa doubles down as the heavy enemy Butcher. Typhon, however, is designed to be more versatile with effectiveness against any enemy. Her kit design revolves around the concept of her being a hunter for all sorts of prey. You just need to pick the right skill for the right situation. For notable performances, for AFK enjoyers, skill 2 is an AFK skill that can find uses in any daily content, so nothing much to that part. Typhon is one of the most popular sniper pick in IS. Although IS-3 will soon be ending when Typhon arrives, her skill 2 can stun off the levitating UFO with ease. Her skill 3 does not need to worry about the freeze from ending 2 boss. Though for other bosses, she's less effective than Posiomka towards Ishamla ending 3 boss, and less effective than Rosa towards Highmore and Mizuki because they are all accompanied by a ton of mobs. The real stage for her to shine is actually IS-4. There are a lot of range tiles that do not make a lot of sense for a lot of operators, but are very friendly for besiegers. The theme exclusive enemies are fast moving, which she can manage with CC in her kit. Quite some bosses are isolated and roam around the map, which is perfect for Typhon skill 3. Not to mention that she can benefit from a ton of IS relics. Skill 2 only has a 50% attack modifier and no modifier for skill 3, so there are a lot of room for attack buffs. Skill 2 with attack speed relics can almost lock an enemy in place, and the Hand of Choker relic is just the ultimate weapon for Typhon since it gets buffed in IS-4. Overall, given how prevalent it is for bosses to do puddle hopping and have multiple phases, Typhon skill 3 will always remain a good tool against them. Although Global missed out on using Typhon in trials for Navigator 3, where she has a low ops count record with Ling in TN4, she will likely remain a comfortable and effective choice in situations likewise. To sum up, Typhon is a 6-star Besieger sniper with a decent kit design. Her Talent 1 gives her high quality damage that is less sensitive towards defense numbers, and Talent 2 increases her efficiency to deal with multiple enemies, while her Skill 2 and 3 cater to AFK playstyles and boss huntdowns respectively. For daily content, I rate her at 7. Her Skill 2 combined with both her talents make up a good AFK choice that deals with mobs quick, while also have the advantage against heavy and high defense enemies. Her Skill 3 is a unique choice to deal with all the roaming elites and bosses who are troublesome to deal with up close. But at the end of the day, she's just a single target operator who can hit one or few more enemies with skill, so she does not perform well when she's got tons of enemies in her range to deal with. For advanced content, I rate her at 6. Having defense ignored means that she will always have some effective damage even when enemy defense numbers are extremely bloated. Her kit is equipped with a lot of attack scouts and CC, which makes her benefit a lot from different buffs. Skill 3 has this mechanism that can deal with enemies from distance, bypassing certain mechanisms, so it can be a sharp tool in hardcore content, and we can already see that in trials for navigators. Weakness of her in this content is Skill 2's low DPS because she will have a harder time one-shotting enemies, Skill 3's susceptibility to attack speed debuffs, and just how long it takes for her to dish out all the damage, while still having a 40-second downtime between skills. Here are ratings previews for upcoming operators including the latest CNY event banner operators. Amongst them, Typhon and Ray, who's coming in around 5 months, are both damage dealers with extensive range. From an AFK perspective, Typhon is definitely the better choice, and for players relatively new to the game, I would also recommend Typhon. However, if you look to do bursts of big damage with fast cycle time, or are interested in trying out some new mechanisms, Ray may be more for you. One more thing I want to stress about the ratings and recommendations is that I do value daily content ratings a bit more than advanced contents. I believe that should be more in line with what most players are concerned about. Overall, I hope this section remains a reference since it clearly is not for everyone and not a judge of the operators being good or bad. I hope you can understand, and that wraps up this series of Operator Hindsight. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.